Happy Rise of the Floodborn Eve. As I'm recording this on November 16th, 2023, we are all anxiously awaiting tomorrow for when our LGSs get Rise of the Floodborn. But the question you have to ask yourselves is even though there are pre sales already available, those prices are all over the map. So, where do you think the prices are actually going to wind up? Well, let me give you my opinion about where I think these prices are going to wind up for each rarity. What are the hottest cards in each rarity for Rise of the Floodborn? Let's take a look at the general market outlook for Rise of the Floodborn. The first thing to understand is we're at the end of the chapter one cycle. We've already seen the prices go down tremendously after those LGS restocks, and there's going to be reprints at the end of this month, beginning of next month. By the time they get out to the market, I think it'll be the start of next month, right around December 1st. So what is that going to do to the market? Well, I think the first few weeks for Rise of the Floodborn are going to be very similar to the beginning of what Chapter One was like. We're talking about the August 17th, 18th weekend, not the Gen Con weekend. So what that means is for the next couple weeks until the end of the month, you're probably going to see very, very increased prices on Rise of the Floodborn because that basically what I've heard is most LGSs are getting about the same stock they got at the beginning of Chapter One. But let me ask you a question. It comes down to the same thing that happened during Chapter One. If you don't have any events that feature Rise of the Floodborn that you need to play in, why would you spend this money anytime during November? We already know that the reprints that are going to happen at the end of November, beginning of December, is going to include Chapter One and Rise of the Floodborn. So prices are definitely going to come down. So, in all honesty, you should be paying a lot closer to MSRP by the end of the month than you are now. So, I really honestly, unless you're able to get product around MSRP now, I would not spend a ton of money now unless you plan to just like sell it for singles or something like that. Like, there's absolutely no reason as a player or even as a collector that you should be buying any Rise of the Floodborn now and paying increased prices unless you can get it, unless you just want to support your LGS and what they're charging for it. That's totally fine. But, looking at it at a macro level, the prices are going to come down in about 2 to 3 weeks. So, again, unless you have any events or you just for some reason really want to use the product right away, I would wait. The other thing I'll say is there's just less overall value, in my opinion, in the long run in Rise of the Floodborn compared to Chapter One. There's several reasons for that, and you'll see as I get into it when I go over each rarity. But in general, Chapter One of or Set One of any card game is always going to form the basis of what happens from then on out. And we don't know what's going to happen in Lorcana in terms of rotations or whether all sets are always going to be legal and all that kind of stuff. So Set One is always going to form the basis of anything. I think when it comes to Disney Lorcana, I think the IPs that are represented in the first chapter one are just more popular. I think the cards are just more popular. I think if you just look at the legendaries, if you look at the super rares, etc., most of the legendaries, the rares, etc., even the commons and uncommons, I think most of your staples are still going to come from chapter one, even when Rise of the Floodborn is fully out there. I still think chapter one is going to form a basis of the metagame. So overall, once stock of both sets is fully available, I believe that the prices from chapter one are going to outpace the prices of singles of Rise of the Floodborn. So let's start with the commons. What are the three commons that I think are actually going to be above, and how do I even judge this? So let's start with how I look at it. For both commons and uncommons, it's basically going to be the same. Are these cards in the starter decks for the set? The starter decks, I believe they are Amber Amethyst and I want to say Sapphire Steel, I think is the other one. I want to say it's some combination of those four. There is no Emerald and there is no Ruby in the starter decks. So the three cards that are on that you see in front of you are the commons that I feel like in the long run of the set are going to hold their value. It's the 2-cost Jafar, Let the Storm Rage, and Improvise. Again, these cards are not in the starter. You want to look for cards long-term value-wise that are not in the starter. Cards that are likely to see universal play. I think all three of these cards are likely to show up in almost any deck that features these colors. Jafar, for example, is a very good two drop. He deals with a lot of evasives. His Floodborn Snake version is very good as well. So I see him just showing up in all kinds of decks, whether or not you play that Floodborn or not. Let the Storm Rage is an excellent, excellent song. It replaces itself. It's basically a fire the cannons that replaces itself. It should see near universal play in any steel deck that's playing any type of like powerful three drop, and most of them are going to be paired with either Amber or Amethyst cards that have very powerful three drops that you can use right away. Not to mention the combo with the one drop Cinderella. That's an extremely powerful and popular combo that I've seen already in testing. So I expect Let the Storm Rage to be a very popular card. And again, it's not in the starters. Improvises a lot of combos, and it basically replaces itself for one ink. You can use it on your opponent's characters if necessary. And I just see it as being a near universal card that's going to see play as well. It basically gives you almost like a 56 card deck if you think of it that way. So I anticipate in terms of commons, these to be the three highest price commons, and we'll see how that winds up as the set goes on. From an uncommon perspective, again, the situation is the same. Are the cards in the starter decks? Again, the cards on the screen are not in the starter decks. They are likely to see universal play, and will they see play outside of more than one archetype? So in this situation, you have bounce, which I think forms the basis of the Emerald Amethyst bounce deck, for lack of a better term, that features Merlins and Mins, etc. I think it's a very powerful option if you are going to run Emerald with Amethyst in that deck. Zero to Hero really allows decks to speed themselves up. It seems like card disadvantage in a way because you're basically trading, exerting a character to sing a song and the card itself to basically, speed you ahead by a number of resources as a one-time gain. So as opposed to like, any of those cards that add ink to your inkwell, like One Jump Ahead or Mickey Mouse Detective, things like that. Zero to Hero is basically a one-time use of multiple ink in that way. But the cards that you can play with it in Amber, especially if you think about it like Stitch Surfer, Stitch Rockstar, etc., the cards that you can play off it often gain you back that card disadvantage that you use to play it. So it really just allows you to start the chain of a lot of those very powerful, popular Amber cards very early. So I've seen it have a lot of good use. Whether or not it'll see universal play, I don't know if it's going to be in every single Amber deck because it is uninkable and you may run out of space. But I have seen good results for it so far in testing. Finally, the Queen of Hearts with Rush, which is Impulsive Ruler, is another one that really, in my opinion, it kind of came out of nowhere. She's a very cheap, popular Rush character. I think she deals with a lot of she answers a lot of cards that need to be answered very quickly. She is a villain. There's a lot of synergy there nowadays. So I do, and she can be shifted for into her larger version quite easily. And I think that card is very powerful. So I think both her and her Floodburn version um, that's also uncommon are going to be standouts as well out of the uncommon slot. Now, uh, when it comes to uncommons, are any of these going to reach Flynn Rider status, Cheshire Cat status from the first set? Probably not. I think the days of $4 to $6 uncommons is probably over. We're already seeing that happen again due to the restock reprints going on for Chapter One. So, I mean, I would not expect that any of these to be a $4 to $6 uncommon. Again, maybe in the first 2 weeks as people are trying to get their cards, quickly, etc. But I don't think that any of these cards are ever going to maintain that value that some of the really popular set one, again, non-starter deck uh, uncommons have reached. What about your rares? Well, the one thing I will say about the rares in this set is rares to me are probably the most popular and powerful cards that you're actually going to find in the set. I was actually surprised during reveal season how many of the I'm like, oh, well, that card's insane. It's got to be super rare. It's got to be legendary. Nope, it's rare. We're talking about most of the powerful cards in the set are rare. A lot of them spawn archetypes on their own. The three that we have, two of the three that we have on the screen, I believe, pretty much spawn archetypes on their own, or at least fill in some major gaps that were in those ink colors. So I think the three that are going to stand out the most and maintain their value or be the highest priced in the long run in the set are Bippity Boppity Boo, Shere Khan, and the one cost Cinderella that's a Singer 3. and they all form different purposes. Bibbidi Boppity Boo, in my opinion, kind of almost forms a deck in of itself. It allows you to replay those characters that have come into play abilities, or just basically trade one type of character for another. It's very powerful with Floodborns, which is obviously a theme of the set. It allows you to quickly play a non Floodborn card that you may have in your hand by substituting with a Floodborn and it's in play. And the fact that it's a song means that you can basically get the use it for free and really like just heavily increase your board status with one play. Sheer Khan also gives Ruby decks an additional win condition. To be honest with you, it turns challenging into challenging for value. So every time you challenge, you're gaining a lore, which means that those decisions are whether or not you want to take out your opponent's characters through challenging, or whether or not you want to quest with them, is kind of answered for you because he basically gives them all a lore when challenging. So I think that in the long run, he may be a harder nut to crack, but his 3/3 stat line for 3 ink, as well as giving you that additional lore incrementally as the game goes on, is just really powerful. Cinderella's already proved her worth. Singer 3 on a 1 drop is something I was really looking forward to. I was expecting her stat line, honestly, to be a 1/1. The fact that she's a 1/2 is even more powerful. She can be shifted into the larger Cinderella, which I think we're going to get to as we talk about super rares. But she can sing some really powerful songs very early. Talking about Friends on the Other Side for, on turn 2, even 1 jump ahead, song on turn 2, which gives you all your ink for turn 2 ready. There's a lot of really powerful things you can do playing her on turn 1. And even if you play her later in the game, the fact that she can sing so far up the curve and sing those important songs up the curve is really powerful. What do you guys think of the rares? Do you agree with me that the most powerful cards in the set, in terms of the ones that are going to show up in most decks, are rare? Let me know below what you think. Let me know if you think, the super rares or legendaries we're going to talk about in a second are going to make a bigger splash. It's my opinion that the value in the set is going to be in the rares, and actually in the super rares, and not so much in the legendaries. But let me know what you think after you watch the rest of the video. In terms of super rares, I actually find that some of these are very deck defining. The ones that we have on the screen are really, to me, the linchpins of the decks that they're in. I actually believe that Rise of the Floodborn has a higher density of good super rares than Chapter 1 had. In all honesty, if you look at the super rares in Chapter 1, a lot of them are pretty terrible. There are some at the very, very top, like Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, and there's some at the very, very bottom, like that Taka, I don't even know, Heartless, whichever one he is, the one that has never seen play whatsoever. There are just some bad super rares in Chapter 1. Granted, there are some good ones, but in general, as a rarity, super rare is pretty bad in Chapter 1 compared to Chapter 2, where I find that most of them, it was actually kind of hard to narrow it down to which 3 I thought were going to be the best when it came to super rares. I think these cards really push the theme of the set. You'll notice that all 3 of them are Floodborn. Cogsworth and Cinderella both utilize the resist mechanic, so I do think they're very much pushing the themes of the set. Are they going to be meta defining? In my opinion, yes. Especially Cogsworth and Cinderella. Cheshire Cat, we'll see what happens, but I do think that there are archetypes that can utilize him very well. And these are very popular characters. I think one of the benefits of both Cinderella and Cogsworth, I think they were two of the first cards that were revealed from Rise of the Floodborn. So there's just been time for them to be compared to other cards, and they keep winning that race. They keep just everything is being compared to them, and they still are coming out on top. So what are we getting from each one of these cards? Well, Cinderella obviously she's a very powerful shift target. She you know she can be shifted on what we now found later to be a 1 drop and the 2 drop Cinderella for extreme value. She breaks the rules of the game by allowing you to challenge your opponent's ready characters. So she really helps keep the board clean and under control. And we've already seen some songs already from this set that are very powerful. But even the typical songs from the first set, she's just going to make good use of them. Cogsworth, to me, honestly, I believe he's where the metagame wheel starts. The fact that he gives all your other characters resist 1 makes them extremely powerful against steel decks, which were very popular, of course, in the Chapter 1 metagame. I think Cogsworth form is a necessary part of the metagame, and once I basically he's in every deck Sapphire card. So I expect him to be very powerful. Cheshire Cat is the last card. I think a lot of what pulls Cheshire Cat around is, first of all, his art is awesome. He's a very fun character, and he has a very powerful ability. It might be difficult, he obviously probably should be paired with Steel, but he has a very powerful ability to get any character off the board as long as you damage them. So I do think he's going to be very popular. He's going to really allow you to control the board, and I think he allows Emerald decks to move into a more control variety instead of just constantly being, using them as aggro decks. One thing I did want to say real quick is you're probably wondering. I mean, if you've been watching this channel for a while, I usually cover all the finance stuff, but a big part of why it's so important early on in a set is because, again, those prices that are out there at the beginning of a set are very wild. It's the complete wild west. Um, we at the Forbidden Mountain, we have our own TCG player store. The link is in the description below. If you are looking for anything from Rise of the Floodborn, please use our store. The prices are no different than ordering off the TCG player marketplace. It just really helps us out if you order from the store, and I really appreciate it. So let's dive right into why you're all here, into the legendaries. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Uh, the legendaries to me in this set are not as exciting as they were in chapter one. There's just nothing else I can really say about that. To me, the three legendaries I have on the screen, it was difficult to narrow it down to three because I'm not positive that almost any legendary in the set is going to see near universal use. In order for a legendary to be above value, and again, like I've said numerous times, I don't think the long term value of the legendaries in this set is going to be equal or definitely not greater than chapter one. Nothing here is a 1/5 for 4 that comes into play with 2 lore and draws you 3 cards. None of them here are comes into play and immediately banishes one of your opponent's characters, whether you're putting them in the inkwell like Hades or banishing them straight out like Maleficent Monstrous Dragon. I mean, none of these cards are doing that. And definitely not the cards that I have not put here. A lot of these cards are basically some of them are build arounds. I mean, if you look at Alice, for example, she's definitely a build around, but she also helps the rest of your team. So will she be, universal in Sapphire decks? Probably not, but she has a very good stat line and is a pretty good threat. So it wouldn't surprise me if she winds up showing up a lot, especially in concert with Cogsworth, that we already talked about. So I think these legendaries are the ones that have the best chance of just basically saying, yeah, I'm going to throw a few of these in my deck, which is what you need for a card to hold value. I mean, that's where you have your Rapunzel, Hades, Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, these expensive legendaries that were out there during chapter one. That's where they got their popularity from, is that they showed up in basically any deck that ran those ink colors. Snow White is very powerful. I wish she was, I guess, I mean, I wish she was inkable, but she's probably, her effect is probably too powerful to make her inkable. I mean, she's basically a recurring Hades. I mean, sorry, yeah, recurring Hades Lord of the Underworld, but I mean, she has to quest to use that ability. So it's going to be difficult for her necessarily to break out. But if you are running the 2-drop Snow White, whether it's the seven dwarf version, probably not, unless you're running a seven dwarves deck. But the remove damage version for as a 2-drop 2/3, she may show up in a bunch of Amber decks, and I would immediately shift this Snow White onto her. And that way you're basically getting, right away with the rush capabilities of having Floodborn and shift. You're immediately getting a use out of her. You'll immediately basically get a card back from your discard pile, which is essentially the same as drawing a card, is the way I look at her. So it was difficult to compare her, for example, to Sisu, who almost made this list as well. But I do think that she just has better use, and she's going to be a better threat in the late game that your opponent's basically going to have to deal with, or else you just start a chain of getting back your best cards over and over again, even if they are playing some type of board sweepers. The last card that's really shined for me in the last few days is the Beast Tragic Hero. If you're not playing against opposing steel or usually ruby decks, his ability to draw you an extra card at the start of the turn pretty much always goes off. So he becomes a threat that your opponent has to deal with literally immediately, and sometimes just waste good cards on him just to prevent you from drawing a card. And it's very rare for that to happen. I don't think he's going to be shifted very often, but I do think almost as a personal draw engine for steel decks, as opposed to like a beast mirror or something like that, he poses both a threat from a questing for lore perspective and drawing you cards. And even if he is damaged, I mean, he basically becomes a 7-5 with damage on him, and that's still really powerful. I do see a lot of decks that also utilize, healing for value, like Rapunzel's, or even the new Popsicle and things like that that are just sitting in play, waiting for a target. So it is possible during your turn to also, remove damage from him so that next turn at the start of the turn, he'll be healed again. And again, your opponent has to deal with him once again, or else you're just going to constantly be drawing cards. Honestly, once he draws you one or like literally one extra card, he's already gotten value. So as if he draws you two extra cards, you're way ahead of the game, in my opinion. It can really help out. He's also a prince if you want to combine him, for example, with the Grand Duke. So I actually find Beast. So those are all the cards at their rarity that I actually think are going to maintain or be above average value going into tomorrow with Rise of the Floodborn. What do you think? What did I miss? I know there are other popular legendaries that are out there that are probably above value, but honestly, I believe that a lot of them are really overvalued right now. I'm not a huge fan, for example, of that, 5 cost Bell. I'm not a huge fan of some of the other ones that are going for decent value. If you want my overall opinion, what would I buy on day one? If you see any of these that are extremely undervalued compared to their peers within that rarity group, I would look to pick those up. The other thing I'd be looking to pick up, honestly, is any of those powerful super rares that you find that are generally under like the $7 to $8 range, because that's where a lot of them are going for in chapter one early. Now they may not be going for as little at the early sales of Rise of the Floodborn, but if they are, I would jump on them because I do think in the long run those super rares and rares are going to hold value. I don't know that we're going to have like the Lilos and Cusco $20 rares, but we may because there are a lot of powerful rares in the set. So good luck hunting. Good luck opening your packs. Good luck getting your enchanteds. I know, good luck with that. We're horrible at opening them, so good luck with that. And I look forward to talking to you week over week as we see where does this Rise of the Floodborn actually wind up. Good luck.